So you have to keep your eye on the ball. At some point, you want to end up being able to experience being. That's what this is all about. You want to be able to experience being, that still and silent, alive, real, actual experience that's there all the time. This is what we want to surrender to. This is what we want to let go into. You know, when we're sitting in meditation, one way to talk about it is, see, the personality will try to meditate. The personality is a doer, right? So when you go to practice meditation, the personality will try and meditate. It will make effort to meditate. Right? It will hunker down. You know, when I look at new meditators' faces, you know, it looks like they're at struggling. You know, to get this thing to happen. You know, I'm gonna sit here, and if I do this long enough, right? Because that's the way the personality lives life, isn't it? Yeah, you got to do it harder, you got to do it longer, you got to do more of it, you got to do it more intensely, you know. More, different, and better is a personality's constitution, right? None of that works in meditation, right? So in meditation, you actually have to sit that out. You know, that's why if you go to a retreat and you do, you know, 7, 8, 10 sits a day, you're sitting it out. You know, you're sitting there with that activity, right? And no matter what it does, no matter where it goes, no matter what it says, you just keep sitting there with it. You just keep being present to it. And if you do this for days in a row, right, it starts to weaken, right? Because there's nobody to play with, right? It starts to weaken. And as it starts to weaken, the light of awareness is now shining brighter. Right? So you start to have this sense of stillness, this sense of tranquility, this sense of well-being now, because now there's some space for the experience of well-being to happen. So we're not thinking about being happy, we're experiencing happiness. We're not thinking about peace. The stillness and the silence offer us peace. So we're becoming familiarized with reality. We're becoming familiar with the truth. We're becoming familiar with the possibility of experiencing tranquility and being grounded and being calm in the face of whatever happens, right? Because the ultimate experience of being alive is to be the awareness, to be in a state of being so that the circumstances lose their ability to affect you, right? And we're practicing this with the low-hanging fruit. We're practicing this with the easier things to deal with, you know. I mean, just sitting here right now, the mind wants to do its thing, right? The mind wants to keep doing what it always does. It wants to think about the noise in the next room. It wants to think about, you know, what's going on in your belly, whether you're hungry. It wants to think about what's going on in your bowels, whether you have to go. It wants to think about how it feels to sit in the chair. Is it comfortable? It wants to think about whether the body's cold or warm, or, you know, it wants to keep doing that. That's what it does all the time, right? And so, you know, nothing terrible is happening. You know, we're not in Gaza. You know, there's nobody has a gun on us, right? So that stuff is just ordinary mental activity. And so we're sitting here, right, and slowing down and getting quiet and still, right, and focusing on being the awareness of the body sitting here breathing. And now, because of that mental activity shows up more clearly, right? Because of that, we're not necessarily as completely identified with it as we normally are, right? So it shows up more clearly, and because it shows up more clearly, now we can kind of see it instead of identify with it. And when we see it, we can see that it is speaking the life of the person. It is speaking the life of time and space. It is speaking the life of survival. It is speaking the life of reaction. And when we didn't know any better, you know, that was real. That was the reality that we were living our life. That was the reality that we were living our life as. And now, because we're slowing down and we're allowing ourselves to get glimpses, you know, we're slowing down, we're allowing ourselves to experience glimpses of awakeness. When we have a glimpse of awakeness, we see it. We see that this voice in the head is not me, and it's the source of suffering. Whenever I'm suffering, it's thinking things that are upsetting. Whenever I'm suffering, it's thinking things that stir up negative emotions, and so now I have the uncomfortable emotion and the negative thought process. And before I know the difference, I believe that stuff, and when I believe that stuff, I live my life consistent with that stuff. So I act stupid. So I act reactive. Right? So I act defensive. I act aggressive, right? I'm constantly, maneuvering my way around in the world, trying to avoid anything too uncomfortable. Maneuvering my way around in the world, trying to, pick the right roads to go down so I get what I want. Pick the right roads to go down so life is easy. And I don't want to be too inconvenienced. There are a lot of people, there are a number of people that can't come here on Sunday morning because their mind doesn't allow that. And if you ask them about it, they'll say, oh, I don't get up that early on Sunday. Are you kidding me? They're so identified with that voice in their head that they literally just speak it right out and say, oh, I don't get up that early on Sunday, right? So you see, if you're living in that state of mind, right, you're living in a detrimental condition. You're living in a detrimental state because that voice is avoiding anything that's inconvenient. If it's too inconvenient, I can't do that. I could never go to a retreat. What, do this practice 7 or 8 times in one day? That's out of the question. It's out of the question, right? You got that voice in your head right now. You do, right? Because if I said, oh, who wants to sign up to go up to Ithaca with me to a 7-day retreat and practice meditation all day long, right? Then if I said that to you and I said, oh, come on, yeah, let's go. You want to sign up for it? Then you can watch the voice. The voice will say, don't say anything. Don't say anything. Don't say anything. And if he asks you directly, tell him, oh, I have to think about that. I'm very busy. I got a lot of things in my schedule and everything. It would be hard. It would be almost impossible to do that, almost impossible. But if I said, well, who wants tickets to the next Taylor Swift concert? Then your mind says, oh, that I can do that. I can do that. Anything that's easy and fun, I'm up for that, right? But anything that challenges me, anything that challenges my way of thinking, anything that challenges the way I feel, anything that challenges my beliefs, oh, that's a different subject. That's a different subject.
Right. You said $10,000 if you come to Ithaca, right?
That's right. That's right. There'd be a line. There'd be a line at that bus, right? You see, what you need to see about that is that's how the mind is using your life. That's how the mind is using your energy to do its thing with your life. And while it's doing its thing with your life, you don't get to experience well-being. You get to be worried. You get to be upset. You get to be concerned, right? You get to feel compelled to think about the future so you can try and control it, right? You're compelled to think about the future so you can try and control it. You're compelled to think about the past, so you can reflect on the things in the past that were upsetting and disturbing and inconvenient, so you can remember those things so you don't do those again in the future. So you're living in the past and the future trying to control the present. And of course it doesn't work, right? Because it's an illusion. It doesn't work, so you're still suffering in the present, right? But you won't give up. You won't give up your approach to this situation because you believe that somehow, some way, somewhere, you're going to get this shit to work. There's no evidence for it. It hasn't worked yet, right? But I watch TV and I watch the shopping channel, and but I can watch the shopping channel because I also watch YouTube and I listen to Eckhart Tolle for a little bit, but I'm pretty busy. So it's interesting, though. The things he says are very interesting, I can talk about that stuff at a party, right? But I don't want to do too much of that because I'll miss the shopping channel. This is the life of the personality, right? This is the life of the personality. It's making decisions about what you're allowed to do. That's what it's doing. It's making decisions, right? And the things that could be the most valuable, the most profound, that could open you up to being fully alive, right? To open you up to experience well-being, to experience what you really, really want to experience more than anything else, right? The things that would open you up to that are things that the personality is not interested in. So therefore, you can't do it. You can't do it. You know, that's one of the things that occurred to me with the first time I went to a retreat, right? Because of course it's challenging. Of course it's challenging. But the thing that occurred to me was that as I looked at the challenge of it, and as I listened to the voice in my head react to the challenge of it, what occurred to me is, why should I listen to that? Why should I listen to that? You know, I know that this has the potential of really giving me a good push forward in the direction of waking up. I know that, and I know waking up is the most important thing in my life. I've learned enough to know that's the case, right? So why should I listen to the voice that's telling me that it's too inconvenient or it's too challenging or you can't do it or I don't want to do it? You know, years ago I was invited to go to Moscow, you know, to teach at a psychology graduate school, right? And, you know, even then going to Moscow was a confrontation, you know, in terms of, do I really, you know, a lot can happen in Moscow, you know. And if I went, I was going to be sponsored by a woman psychologist that lived in Moscow. So they took care of the visa and paid all my expenses, right? But nonetheless, I still had to travel there alone and be in Moscow where I couldn't speak the language and where I didn't understand a lot of how things went on, right? And so that was a confrontation, right? But again, it was another one of those times in my life when the voice in my head would say, no, you don't want to do that, you know, and you could, just bad things can happen over there, you know, you're far away from home, you know, that's a foreign government, But again, I looked at it and I said, why should I listen to that? It's an opportunity for me to deal with fear. It's an opportunity for me to deal with being in an unknown place, to use my ability to be present and creative so that I can experience how the circumstance or the situation is not going to determine me. That's what we're up to here, right? Because there's nothing we can do about the circumstances that will occur in our lives. Are you clear about that? There's nothing you can do about the circumstances that will occur in your life. And as my teacher says, you know, as you get older, the circumstances are predictable. When you're younger, you know, you can, if you're young and beautiful and strong, you know, you can kind of control shit, you know what I mean? If the relationship isn't working, you'll leave. You know, you can leave, right? Or if the job isn't working, you'll quit, right? Or you'll take, you know, you'll make changes. Oh, I'll go travel in Europe for a while. You know, if you're young, you know, and you have the wherewithal to do that, you can do that. But then as the body gets older, you start to realize that this is one thing that I have no control over. You know, I have no control over what goes on here in this flesh thing. And the mirror is telling me something's going on here, that this thing's getting old, right? And I can feel a difference. I don't have the energy I used to have, right? I got pain where I didn't have pain before, right? And I know this is coming to a conclusion, right? So once you're clear about that, see, this is something that's very important for you to think about, and that's why death is such a teacher, right? Because to deal with confronting death is dealing with the truth. To deal with confronting death is dealing with the truth. Why? Because it causes more suffering than any other situation for human beings, doesn't it? Doesn't it? I mean, you know, look at the news. It's interesting that we're fascinated with the thing we're most afraid of, right? Do you know what the most popular theme in movies is? Well, death, right? Isn't murder death? Right? If you look at the movies that are playing anytime and then look across those movies in terms of the subject matter of the movies, right? The thing that will be more common than anything else across the board will be death. Somebody dying, a war, a murder, right? A detective story where somebody got murdered, a rape, right? Those are the things that we're fascinated to look at it, right? But we're fascinated to look at it because we can feel good about the fact that it's happening over there, not over here, right? And so we don't want to look at it over here, because if we look at it over here, it means I'm going to die, right? this is something that you should be dealing with if you're serious about waking up, if you're serious about what this has to offer, right? You should really contemplate death. Contemplate the end, the conclusion of this human life that you're experiencing. Contemplate that this body is that's what happened with Ramana Maharshi. He's a famous teacher, right? He was a teenager, and his father passed away, and it freaked him out. He had never really thought about death. It freaked him out, really scared him, right? And so what he did is he lied down on the floor and he said, well, I want to know what happens. I want to know what happens when this body stops, when the breath stops. I want to know what happens. So he laid down on the floor and really pretended, you know, that he was going to stop breathing, and the body was going to get stiff. And because he let go sufficiently, right? Let go of his identity as a personality and a body, right? Because he let go sufficiently, he got it all at once. He had the experience of the truth all at once, and he came out of that and he realized that what I am isn't physical, what I am doesn't exist in time, right? And he just left home and went to the nearest temple and started to meditate in the basement of the temple, right? And threw his clothes away, threw his money away, and just went and sat in the temple. And he was really just interested in experiencing what he really was. He was no longer interested in time and space in the physical world. He wanted to be in this experience full time. And so he sat there and meditated until the insects started to eat his body, right? And eventually somebody who had seen him went and pulled him out of there and gave him some food and everything. And then eventually he decided that he would talk to people and so forth. And he started to look into what the teachings were and started to develop an understanding of what had happened to him. And he spent the rest of his life living in this sacred place in India where there was temples and so forth. His mother came and tried to talk him out of staying there and come home. But he talked her out of leaving, and she stayed there with him the rest of her life. And she died there, and he claimed that when she died that she was awake, that she was liberated. Right? So the thing about this is, and the reason she stayed there is because once you get it, see, that's the hump here, the thing that you really want that you have to get over in order for this to work, right, is you have to get the possibility as a real possibility. You know, you have to get that death isn't real, that death is not going to happen, and give yourself the benefit of existing in a life without that fear. Stop surviving. Stop worrying about the end. You know, stop being so concerned about the end. What's going to happen is going to happen, right? What's going to happen to this body is, you know, it's like when you get old enough, right? It's not a question of whether something's going to go wrong. It's a question of what it is. That's all. It's definitely something's going to go wrong, right? Something's going to fail in this flesh thing, right? Depending on a lot of different factors, right? But that's guaranteed to happen, right? So don't wait for it, you know? Don't wait until you're in a condition that is putting a lot of pressure on you as far as your ability to tolerate the whole thing. You know, start practicing being what you are. Stop practicing sitting still and experiencing the stillness and the silence and the tranquility, and just allow yourself to notice that when you're in that, when you're experiencing that, when you're being what you are, when you're in a state of being, that the things that were bothering you aren't bothering you during that time. Why? Because you're not thinking about them. You're not bringing it up, right? You're not bringing it up. You're not reviewing it anymore. And once you catch on to how this works, then you start practicing not thinking. You start practicing not thinking. You start being awake and aware enough that when thoughts start to come into your mind, right, about things that are going to be disturbing to think about, you realize that and you stop doing it. You stop thinking about it because you realize that all I'm doing by thinking about it is creating suffering for myself. So why do that? Doesn't make any sense to do that. It's not going to change anything because you're thinking about it. Of course, there will be times when the thoughts take over and the emotions take over, and you just can't get out of it. You just can't get out of it. But if you've been practicing and you have enough awakeness, right, When that's happening, you know that it's happening. That's a difference right there. That's different. If you're in a crazy state of mind and you're upset and you're angry, right, and you're annoyed or whatever, and it's strong enough that you can't do anything about it, right, but you're aware of what's happening, that you know that it's got you, that's a big difference. That's a big difference. But because before that, you didn't know that anything had you. You believed what you were angry about, and you believed that somebody or something made you angry, and you behaved consistent with that. And you caused your blood pressure to go up, and you caused your body to, to burn up a lot of energy unnecessarily, right? So once you wake up, it doesn't mean that all the time you're going to have the upper leg on what's going on. It doesn't mean that. It just means that now you know you're thinking when you're thinking. It's just like my teacher said when you talk about your walking meditation. Well, I'm aware that I'm walking when I'm walking. That sounds like a stupid, simple thing, doesn't it? Yeah, but if you pay attention when you're walking, very seldom are you aware that you're walking when you're walking. You're somewhere else. You're somewhere else. The body's on its own. The body's walking on its own, right? So when you practice being aware of walking when you're walking, what are you practicing? You're practicing being where life happens. Life happens now. Walking happens now. Right? So if you practice being aware of walking when you're walking, you're being where life is happening now. And when you're being where life is happening, which is now, right, then you're not going to suffer because right now, right here, there is nothing happening to cause you to suffer unless you're thinking about something. You see? Most of the time, if you could be present to what's happening in the reality of the moment, right, you'll be relaxed and calm because most of the time nothing's happening. Most of the time nothing's happening. Most of the time, you're just going through the motions. You're just doing your daily shit, right? So nothing serious is happening. But by practicing that way of being awake and aware, you get to enjoy reality because you're there for what's happening in your life. So when the birds fly overhead, or when you go to get in your car and you see the spring plants are coming up, or you wake up in the morning now and the birds are singing because the season's changing, you notice all of it. You notice all of it. And not only do you notice all of it, but you realize this is my life happening. This is my life happening. And all the things that happen that are negative that I resist and I don't like and I don't want, right? That's only half the story. The other half of the story is all the things that are wonderful that I love and that I enjoy are happening. So I have so many blessings. And if I'm awake and aware of the blessings, right, then when the negative things come, it's just the way life works. You got to have up to have, you got to have down to have up, don't you? You wouldn't know, you wouldn't experience the positive emotions without the negative emotions. It wouldn't work. How would it work? Right? So if you understand that the opposites are necessary for things to manifest, right? Everything that is manifest, everything that appears has to have an opposite in order for it to appear, right? So that works. And if that works, it means your negative emotions aren't wrong. They're a necessary aspect of a human life. And so you stop fighting with it, you stop resisting it, right? When it comes, you welcome it because it's life. Why reject it? It's life, right? And there's no way out of it. I mean, you can, if you reject the present moment and you live in your head, right? Life goes on without you, right? So if you understand, if you really come to an understanding, that may be the most important thing about this whole thing. If you really come to an understanding about what's happening here, right, then you'll want to be awake, won't you? Yeah, do you want to continue to live in your head? Do you want to continue to have a thought process about life instead of experiencing it? Of course not. Nobody wants that, right? But then you have to allow yourself to have a conviction about it. If you see that there's something possible, something available here, but it's not going to happen by itself, right? You've got to make yourself available for it to happen. That's what we're doing in meditation, making ourselves available to experience reality. By not being in the condition that we're normally in, right, which is separating ourselves from reality all the time. Now we're going to sit here and actually be aware of being aware. When? Now. Now. And every time the attention goes to thinking, it's not now. Every time the attention goes to thinking, the thinking is happening after what is experiencing is happening. So it's not now. So if you come back, if you keep coming away from that, back to being aware of the body breathing, when is that happening? Now. So I'm practicing being here now. For what? For life. Why? Because that's where well-being is. That's where what I want exists. That's where all the wonderful things happen, right? So you want to, one of the ways that this used to be spoken of in the past is you should practice like your hair's on fire, because you don't have time. You know what I mean? You don't have time. That's one of the things the personality thinks that's not true. Personality thinks you have time, doesn't it? It's planning for tomorrow, isn't it? It's planning for next year, planning for next week, right? It's acting as if there's time. There is no time. There is no time. You don't have time. You can't afford to wait. You can't afford to wait. And especially, why wait for something that's already here? Why wait for something that's already happening? Why wait to experience the truth when the truth is always here happening? But what you have to do is you have to start paying attention to what's really happening instead of what you think about it, right? What you think about it means that you're having an academic experience of your life, right? You're having an academic experience of your life. You're experiencing your life like it's a story, aren't you? You're experiencing your life like it's a story that's happening, right? And you want the story to go well, so you want to do everything you can, right, to manipulate the situation so the story goes well. But you can't. That's the shakeup. That's the thing that happens for people, that some shock will happen. You're living your life in your routine. You think you know what's going on all the time, right? And then some shocking thing happens, some accident, some serious diagnosis, some death of somebody that you're close to. Something knocks you out of your patterns, right? And then you freak out, say, oh shit, I'm gonna die, oh shit. That's an opportunity, that's a blessing, right? That's a blessing because it's shaking you up. It's shaking you up because it's allowing you to experience as a personality that you're going to fail. A personal life is a failed life. It cannot possibly succeed. And when you see that, that's the motivation to start to do these practices, right? But it's up to you to do it. And the thing that's going to stop you to do it is the state of mind that keeps coming back to you, doesn't it? Keeps coming back to you. So you've got to be consistent. You've got to start practicing meditation in life, not just formally, right? But you've got to practice being awake all the time. That's called walking the path. Practice being awake. Practice being who I really am. If I'm being who I really am, then I have nothing but kindness and compassion to offer all other human beings, because love your neighbor as yourself is not just a saying if I'm awake, it's the truth. It's the truth.